Hello. First of all, I happen to be wearing my Red Cross shirt, and unfortunately, I haven't donated in a while. That's on me. Also, part of me is like, maybe I should just donate plasma and get paid for it, but I digress. What does the banjo, a mandolin, guitar, upright bass, moonshine jug, washboard all have in common? They are bluegrass instruments. So, bluegrass is something, it's a genre of music, it's country related, it's hillbilly stuff. It's something that I like to listen to, some of it. I'm definitely more of a folk guy. I gotta remember that the camera's over here. I'm definitely more of a folk guy than a bluegrass guy, but I like some of it, but I don't necessarily play that much of it. Now, it just so happens that an acquaintance of mine, a friend of mine, I don't want to disparage his good name. A good friend of mine, plays mandolin, and we've been playing music together, every month or so, or a couple months, or like whatever, for the last 3-4 years, something like that. And he got an opportunity to play live at a farm around here, Oxbow Farm, July 26th, 6 p.m. to sundown. And he told me, like, he just felt like he couldn't pass it up, and so him and his brother initially were the duo that were going to play, and then he started recruiting more and more people, and I was one of those people. I was very flattered when he asked me if I would play guitar with him and his brother, live up there on the stage. The stage is a hay trailer, like that you would go on a hay ride on, but it's still a stage, used as a stage, elevated above the crowd. We went and checked it out Friday. It was a big crowd. It was like 60 plus people. But it got me thinking about, I have never played in public like that in really any capacity, on a stage in front of people, whatever, like played out live, done a gig, etc. And I'm really excited. I think it'll be really fun. I'm super flattered that he asked me and considered me good enough to consider, but allow myself to introduce myself. But it's gonna be fun. But it got me thinking about, I'm 28. I'm not like old, but I'm not super young. And I haven't played music live, again, like in a public setting. Like, I've played in front of people for sure, but not ever until, still technically I haven't, not until this happens will I have crossed that threshold there. And I'm excited, but it gets me thinking about, like, the version of me that has done something like this earlier, and maybe a lot more than just once, and sort of like these alternate versions of ourselves that we think about, sometimes, where we went down a different path. And I think that in a previous episode I mentioned there was a couple instances of my life where I had a fork in the road, and I, me or something else picked for me one or the other, and it just happened to lead me to where I'm at. And I enjoy where I'm at. I love where I'm at. I love everyone in my life right now. But sometimes you think about these other things, like, I do love music. I love playing music. There's a world where I started playing out sooner, and maybe I could have had a bunch of gigs or been in different bands or whatever and had a good time. And who knows what that would have been like. It would have been cool. hopefully I play more in the future, and this sort of gets me a little more accustomed to it and out there where I can do that without being too nervous, or like start to get into the world of like, how do I even put myself out there, and also just like force myself to get in the process of learning more songs so I could maybe one day even do it solo, and obviously figure out the right equipment that I need to do that. And so that's something that I've thought about a lot. And again, I hope that I do continue to pursue it regardless. But, you know, there have been these different points in my life where it seemed pretty binary of like, you're either going to do this or you're going to do that, and you pick one and then everything goes on. And I think everyone has those sort of moments, or at least like one, once you get to a certain age, of course. And there's all sorts of stuff that goes into it. Like, I guess you could say like where you're born is a big factor, and like whatever, and like all sorts of stuff. But I'm talking about those specific moments where you yourself can remember, like, I had a choice to think about and I picked one or the other, or the choice was taken from me, or like whatever, but it was going to be something that it did not ultimately become. So the first one that I remember is going into third grade. I had been marked or identified or discussed as being like gifted in the advanced classes, etc., etc. Not uncommon, you know, like I guess percentage wise, maybe literally a minority, but you know, I don't know. I picked things up well as a kid, and so there was an opportunity, there was a decision actually that going into third grade after elementary school, because where I was from, we had an intermediate school, which was elementary and then intermediate and then middle school or junior high and then high school. Going into third grade, there was a discussion or offer, and I even toured the place, of going to sort of like a private academy, and it was a pretty advanced spot for the time. Like I remember they had like science labs and stuff, and they had more of like almost like a collegiate curriculum style, like not in terms of like literally college level classes for third graders, but the class structure and schedule was different than just regular elementary school. And again, like I said, I remember going there and looking at it and talking to people as a pre-third grader and having the conversations with my parents. And when I say conversations, it's not like it was that deep, because I was 6, 7, you know, like, and keep in mind, my parents were about my age. Like my dad was about 26 and my mom was about 29. So they were just worried about getting through the day and not having anyone starve to death or hurt themselves, you know. But this sort of came up, and my parents were pretty hands off in a general sense, and so they left it up to me. They were like, if you want to go, you'll go. If you don't want to go, you won't go. In hindsight, I think I would have benefited a lot more from being just put into that environment, especially, you know, considering that I was had an aptitude for things at that point. But it's so silly, you know, because at the time I'm a little kid. I was like, well, my friends are going to this school that I had already been, you know, going to. So I was like, I don't want to lose my friends or whatever. Not understanding as a 6-year-old that like one of those kids moved away and you stopped talking to one of those kids in like 6th grade and then whatever, like, you know what I mean? It's like, you're not always friends with the kids that you're friends with in 2nd grade. That's just not how it works. Sometimes you are, and that's great. But sometimes you definitely aren't. And so that was the case, you know, like some kid did move away. Like I remember the exact kid that I was thinking of when I was like, oh, I don't want to move away because like I'm friends with this guy and whatever. And he did. He moved away like, I don't know, 4th or 5th grade, something like that. And we ended up never even really being like that good of friends. But so when we're talking about these hypothetical different people that I could have been, that's at an early enough point and at a sort of like such a particular sort of like junction to choose, where like, yeah, if I had went to that private school, who knows what could have happened. Like maybe I just like didn't like it and came right back, or like failed out, or like whatever, and just like, it wasn't even a big deal. But also it's like having some sort of having a better education. Not to say that my education was bad, because it wasn't. For a public school education, I think it was really good. I think I had good teachers and programs and all that, but it could have been this whole different thing. And then who knows if through just that time developing, if I had the right other people in my life to get me to sort of see education in a different way and develop study skills better, and like whatever, could have been a better, scholastic, academic student, person, whatever. And that's just like a whole new life. I really, that would just be a totally different Jordan. And I don't know, would I have retained some of the qualities that I have now, in terms of like, I feel like I sort of am pretty imaginative and creative, and feel like I have a unique perspective on a lot of things, which is why I want to record it a little bit to get it down for posterity, or for the AI to, assimilate me. That's fine too. But I don't know. Would have I been a huge stick in the mud? What would have my family life been, or affected that at the same time? Because like my sister was still just going into public school, and like my parents got divorced, obviously, eventually. Would that have pressed on them financially sooner, or like changed their sort of trajectory? Ultimately, yes, in some capacity, but I don't know. So that's an interesting one to think about. Not that I like hold it against my mom, or like resent her or anything, or really like I'm sitting here every day like, oh, I wish I was this and not who I am, because that's not true. I mean, in a reasonable and rational sense, I do literally think that, like, yeah, in hindsight, from my perspective, like to my mom, I'm like, yeah, you probably should have put me in that school, like if I had the opportunity. Like if I were my kid at that time, I would have been like, this is a good fucking idea. Sorry. So then skipping forward to a different sort of fork in the road, and there's plenty of these. I don't know if I'm going to get to like every one that I think of, but I'll just sort of talk and see where it goes. A pretty distinct one for me is when I was in middle school, I got arrested for breaking and entering. I didn't get charged with anything, but I did get arrested, hooked and booked, whatever, which makes it sound like I was a delinquent criminal. That's not the case. I was, at that time, still a pretty goody two-shoes. Like I just didn't want to bother anyone or cause any trouble or get in trouble, like whatever. Like I was definitely like, as long as everyone overlooks me and I could just skate by, like that's what I wanted to do. But through a coincidence, I was in a house that a friend of mine's family, there's no quotes on that, a friend of mine's family no longer owned, but as a 12-year-old, you don't understand that the bank owns it now or like whatever. And it was unlocked. I didn't break anything. I did enter. If anything, it was just trespassing. But someone saw us or heard us in this house, called the cops, and the cop, small town cop, nothing better to do. It's like the middle of the afternoon or whatever. He arrests us instead of being like, go home, like get out of here and don't do this again, or I will arrest you and ruin your life. But instead, he arrested me and ruined my life. No, that's not the case. I mean, do I still think, again, do I think that was the right choice in hindsight? Like if I were him? No, I don't. But this leads us to the actual fork in the road. And, obviously there could be a fork. What if I didn't do that? Certainly. But like, I was 12, I was naive. I don't really blame myself that much for that situation in terms of the actual consequences. Like, was it stupid? Yeah. Do kids do stupid stuff? Yeah. Can you prevent that? To an extent, but not really. But what it led to is when I was a senior in high school, at that point, I did not go to some cool private academy or whatever. And I had been through the public education system, and not necessarily because of the public education system, but because of who I was as a person, I didn't like education. I didn't like institutionalized education. I loved learning. I still love learning, but the system, the structure, the rules, all just the way it was just didn't vibe with me, and it seemed unreasonable and confusing. And I was like, screw this. I don't want to go to college. I don't want more of this. Like, I just want to live my life. And I come from a family of Navy veterans, and I wanted to join the Navy. I was like, I'm going to join the Navy and do what I do. And if I love it, then yeah, I'll do it. If not, I'll have 4 years of just real life experience, or just at the very least having my fucking housing paid for, and, save up some money and get out. And then I'll be 22 or whatever. And then if I wanted to go to school on the GI Bill or like whatever, you know what I mean? It's like, that's a totally valid, it's a totally valid choice in life, and probably a pretty good one. I think that for most people, the military is a good option and gives them a lot of structure and discipline in their life that they probably didn't have, like me. For some people, it's a bad choice, but it happens. For some people, it's a great choice. But I'd really wanted to join the Navy. That was where I saw my life going. I had been getting a lot closer with my grandfather, who was a Navy veteran and was one of the first adults in my life that sort of started to talk to me as if I was an adult. You know what I mean? Like, start to really talk to me, and not just like me as a kid or like a kid. Me as an individual, as a person. And that was a huge influence on me at the time, and still is. But so I joined the delayed entry program, which is where you technically enlist as a 17-year-old, and you go and you do your MEPS and your paperwork and blah, blah, blah. And, go through the system before you graduate, and then you actually deploy to boot camp after you graduate. But here's the thing. Because of the record of arrest, that counted as a felony in terms of joining. It had equivalent repercussions. And so I wasn't allowed to join, at all. And since like when you try to join the military, you have to have like your full background check, your social security card, like whatever, like they have all sorts of information, and it all has to be transparent. So if I had tried to join later, it would have shown up that I already got rejected that time, and what for. And the irony is that if I had waited until I was 18, the record of arrest would have been expunged because I was a minor. But since I had tried to join as a 17-year-old, it was still there. But then as an 18-year-old, once I became 18, the record of me trying to join and getting rejected was still there. And for why? So basically, my whole plan was to just join the Navy. I was like, F school, whatever, I'm out, I'm just going to do this thing. And also, the big kicker was I did really well on the ASVAB. I got like a 95% or something on the ASVAB. I qualified to take a nuclear engineer test, an additional test that you have to qualify for just to take after the ASVAB. And I passed that too. And I was on deck to be sworn in. I was about to do the thing where you put your hand on the whatever and you say, I solemnly swear. to be a sailor in the United States Navy or whatever. And my recruiter called me and they were like, hey, I'm outside, got to pick you up. Like we have an issue, etc. And that was it. Like my plan was gone and I had to sort of think about if I could get into college or whatever. At that point, it was like January, February, March of my senior year, and everyone had already gotten approved for schools and had everything planned out or whatever. And I was like, oh shit, and then all my teachers were like, you should go to college, like you're smart or whatever. And that's just like what they tell you to do, which again, in hindsight, I shouldn't have done. If anything, I should have went to a trade school or something. But again, another fork in the road. At the time, you're like, oh, that's where the dumb kids go. Joke's on fucking me. I could have went to fucking our vocational school for 2 years and became whatever apprentice right out the gate and started making good money right out of high school, and then gotten to my journeyman like at the age of 21, 22, 23, whatever, and been cruising and not even have to do that for the rest of my life, but at least had a good ass qualification to do something that's real. But I digress. The Navy thing. I didn't want to be a nuclear engineer initially. I wanted to be a naval corpsman, which is what my grandpa was, which is basically ultimately a medic in the Marine Corps. Like you have to go through Marine Corps boot camp, but you're still a part of the Navy, but you're the medic. You help injured Marines. And yeah, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to continue this legacy of Navy veterans. It was all right there, and it was really important to me because I was close with my grandfather. It was important to me because I didn't feel like I related to other men in my family at the time because I wasn't athletic. I didn't wrestle and all of them did or whatever. There was a gap there that I wanted to close and feel like I belonged and all these things. And on top of that, nuclear engineers go on subs, and you're like, subs aren't great. And no, they're not great. But guess what? I probably would have been stationed in Hawaii. So I could have lived in Hawaii, made good money, or decent money, I could have gotten all this experience as a nuclear engineer, which doesn't directly translate to civilian nuclear engineer stuff, but the experience helps a fucking lot. Could have gotten to a good school maybe. Could have been a full-on professional private sector nuclear engineer. They make a bunch of money and lived in Hawaii. You know what I'm saying? It's like it gets to be this, like, on the outside appears like this golden ticket that was taken away from me. And again, I'll never know whether or not that was the case, or if I would have ultimately not gotten that contract or decided to be something else anyways, or who knows? I could have transferred services if I wanted to, like, or whatever. Maybe I got hurt and got, a medical discharge. Who knows? There's no way to know for sure. And so that's why you can't really, like, compare things like that, because it's like you're comparing against, like, a fake ideal. But as just like a hypothetical and things that you think about, it's like, yeah, like that was a big one for me. Not even because like the Hawaii and the potential career thing or whatever, even though like that is a big deal. Like having a career like that could have been way different. A good career in the military or not is a substantial difference. But for me, it was like losing this opportunity to be part of this legacy. And then that following September, at the very beginning of my college career, my grandpa passed away. And I would have been in boot camp or back from boot camp potentially by the time he had passed. And I didn't get that, and it was gone, and it was also like right out of the gate for me in terms of being an adult and being in the real world. And it definitely affected my time at college. And, then more things did, and it got complicated, and it wasn't for me in the first place. Like, there's a lot of things that sort of threw my collegiate trajectory off. I don't know why I thought I was cut out for academia when I hated school my entire life, but there's plenty of things that I wasn't cut out for that I tried. But so that's like a big fork in the road. That's probably the biggest one. Because just who knows? I mean, it's hard to compare because, like, yeah, obviously if my third grade life changed, that would have exponentially sort of affected everything else. But that's the one that I sort of held on to for a long time. And in fact, a couple years ago, I even went to an Army recruiter and talked to them about joining the Army because I was like, could I get into, or could I have gotten into the Army or whatever? Because it had always felt like a choice that had been taken away from me. And so I had that chip on my shoulder about it. And, I was older. I was like 26 at this point, trying to join the Army or like thinking about joining the Army. And I went to a recruiter. I took a practice ASVAB and all that, and things were good. It was set up. He was like, that's all figured out now or whatever, or like they changed their standards. Like it's all good. Like I could have joined the Army at the time that I was looking into it. And that is what helped me accept the whole situation and move on from it, because it was like, okay, like now my life is my choice. Like I did have an opportunity taken away from me, but then I moved on. Like I chose to live my life in a different way, and that really changes things. I was not as spiteful of the whole situation. And then there's other smaller things as time goes on. I mean, there's big things that I don't necessarily want to get into too, but when my high school girlfriend and I broke up, I could have stayed at the job I was at, and it was a pretty good gig, and they would have paid for school, and I could have transferred to a different state and lived in Oregon or whatever, and who knows what would have happened. That could have been a different thing, but I ended up moving back home and so on and so forth. Things happen. Like meeting my girlfriend now, it's like, what if we had just bounced off each other or wrong place, wrong time or whatever, and where would I be? There's all sorts of hypotheticals that you can think about, and I think about sometimes. I mean, I try not to dwell on the past in general, but bringing up the music thing and the bluegrass thing, it's like, I do think about, oh man, what if I had been more intentional about my music path and practice and skills and career, like whatever. But as I'm approaching my time here, I just want to say that I've learned to love who I am and accept who I am for who I am and trust who I am more than anything. Like every time I've tried to resist that or think that I should be someone that I'm not and try to go for it, it's always worked out poorly. And, part of it is figuring out who you are anyways. Who are you supposed to be and act like, and sometimes that just takes time to learn. But it's important to trust that, just because someone's like, oh, you should join the whatever, or you should try to get this job, or like whatever, it's like, maybe, and it's not like that's a bad idea or a bad path, and it might be the right path for you, but also you should trust that everything that you've done has brought you to this point for a reason. And I've gotten happier and more content, and to an extent incrementally more successful from trusting myself and trusting that the reason I'm at where I'm at now is because I trusted the things I was going to do, and anytime that I didn't, that's what caused issues, not whatever else I was blaming it on. And like, it's not that cut and dry. Like, obviously there's all sorts of things that cause issues or whatever, but I'm saying to an extent, holding on to that, like, I should be this right now, or I should have done this, is not going to serve you. You need to focus on who you are now and trust that, you know, you're gonna make your own way, because you're an individual, and that's just what happens, and you can't fight it. And the more you try to let other people steer you as well, the more that they're going to steer you wrong, I think. And that's something that I had to learn and accept, and socially, or whatever, be able to just be okay sort of telling people, like, that's cool and all, that's a good idea, whatever, but you know, I'm just gonna do my thing and let it be. And this series is part of it, you know, and it's gotten me to the point where I can play some bluegrass. And, you know, maybe I could have done that sooner, or maybe I could have played something that wasn't bluegrass, but here I am, and I'm excited, and it's gonna be a fun time. And hot dog, you know, if that ain't groovy, I don't know what is. I'm excited. So I hope to see you there, whoever's watching.